Okay, this one comes with a spoiler alert. I know I didn't do a spoiler alert for my Morbius video, but I mean, let's be honest, it's Morbius, isn't it? But this is hotly anticipated. We've been waiting for years for an Obi-Wan show that explores what he was up to between episode 3 and episode 4, because that's such a huge time gap. Now we've had so much media that has covered that area, and so much canonized and then not canonized media that has explored that era too. Looking at you, Force Unleashed. But now we get to see what Obi-Wan was up to, and it's exactly what I thought it was. Nothing has happened in the show that I didn't think. Wow, that's a great. Not even a minute in. Nothing happened in this that I didn't think would. Obi-Wan is obviously feels washed up. He goes to have a mundane job to just survive. He lives in a cave. He looks over Luke. Uncle Ben doesn't want him to. Uncle Ben doesn't want him to get involved in that life. But Obi-Wan has to, and he has to prepare for him to do that, and he has to get the timing right. Obviously, Leia gets raised by rich parents and has to deal with, the politics and all of that, and being rich and blah, 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 blah. Everything happens exactly how I thought it would, but you can't really help that. I mean, that's par for the course. That was always going to happen. Fortunately, throughout the show, they'll be able to explore new things, and hopefully the canon of everything won't get in the way of things too much. So Obi-Wan has a job, I'm trying not to spoil too much, but I really don't think this will. He's cutting this meat, and there's this great set with this giant monster behind him. And they do this trope of showing the same shots over and over again of the same shots of the same character doing the same thing, but maybe the fringe is moved a little bit out of the way. You can almost see, obviously they shot it one after another. This is the fourth take of Obi-Wan looking up and pocketing a bit of meat. Ewan, can you just move a little piece of your fringe, please? And it works. It does. You do get the sense that Obi-Wan is just living and waiting for Luke to be ready, really, and I think that's a cool angle to have explored. It kind of feels like the end of Hurt Locker, when Jeremy Renner's, he just wants to be put back in the box and sent back out to war. Obi-Wan doesn't want to be hanging around, and he's always thinking of Luke, and he really wants to get back out there, and he's just waiting and waiting and waiting for his chance to, get back and sort of dig himself up out of the dirt and not feel washed up anymore. But he does. And, Uncle Ben disapproves of it. There's a lot of, back and forth between them. And we also follow Leia, who, obviously has been raised by her parents as a little rich kid. And she, like I said, she has to deal with the politics and all of that. Now, the thing about the Leia character is, I thought she was good, well performed, good casting. She looks like what I'd expect of Leia at that age. And I do like the fact that they introduced this duality of, you have one farm boy and you have a rich girl, and they actually come from the same family. But here's the difference, Uncle Ben has to make ends meet. Uncle Ben has to wear the rags, blah, 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 blah. Whereas Leia just gets everything handed to her. And I thought it would be very interesting to explore how Leia feels about that. At the moment, I do like the fact that she's gently rejecting her sort of background. But at the same time, I think it's sort of a bit of a trope, and they don't want to. They've made her rambunctious, they've made her rebellious, and they've made her sort of a free spirit, in the same way that they do with sitcoms where it's set in this giant house, like Modern Family, something like that, where the parents are absolutely rich and they have these obnoxious teenage kids. And instead of them completely rejecting it, they listen to emo rock in their bedroom, and they have boyfriends climb through the window, and they wear their green coats and, become rebellious. But really, what are they doing? They're still piggybacking off of their parents. And that's how I feel about Leia at the moment. Of course, she's a very young character, so what should I expect? Not too much. I do think that there's room for development, and I'd rather watch her develop into a character who rejects that. Although, unfortunately, part of the cause as a prequel, I don't think we're going to see much of that. I don't think they can. She's also responsible for some of the worst scenes in the show. I don't think it's the actor's fault. I think it was poorly directed, and I think they should have done more takes with a couple of the scenes that she's in. But obviously her paths... Sorry, I'm just trying to think of ways to present this without spoiling it. So Yeah, no. So her paths meet obviously with Obi-Wan, and so Obi-Wan's journey starts on Tatooine, and I'm happy to see Tatooine back. I'm going to talk about sets. I like Tatooine. I'm a little bit burned out on it. I'm a little bit burned out on those snowy desert environments. One of my earliest memories was being sat down with a VHS tape of Star Wars and seeing Luke and R2 and C-3PO walk through the desert. And from that moment on, I absolutely loved Tatooine. But man, like, we had a desert planet in Mando, we had a desert planet in Book of Boba Fett, we have a desert planet. It's just, and a lot of Episode 9 was set in the desert too. I feel as though they really are just gripping onto this a little too much. Fortunately, by Episode 2, we are treated to a gorgeous set, an absolutely beautiful set. It looks a lot like the city from Episode 2. The film Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. That's my least favorite film in the entire series, so I don't know if it's exactly is that city, but my god, is it beautiful. I liked it in Episode 2, the movie, and I love it in the second episode of this show even more. It's absolutely beautiful, and the pacing of this show is a lot slower, and it gives you time to really take in these environments. So you really get to take in Obi's cave, which I think is a little too neat and tidy for for how I'd present it. But at the same time, what can you do if it has to lead on to him living in there in Episode 4? It needs to look like the cave from Episode 4. But you really get to take in Tatooine and the town, but it really opens up when you get to the city, and they really do explore some interesting themes. Obi-Wan presents the situation as someone who's been kidnapped, and he's told by a random member of the public that if someone is kidnapped here, they're not coming back. And I think that's a mature theme to explore in this show. I mean, it is Star Wars. Speaking of sets, by the way, I want to talk about the opening scene, which I absolutely adored. Oh my god, the opening scene to this show is so fantastic, and I actually think a high point of the show, unfortunately. And we get to see the Jedi Temple again. It's nostalgia, babe, and a lot of this show is, you get to go back to where Luke grew up, which looks good, but I think in Episode 4 it was so beautiful, and the score just swept you up in the moment. I actually think the most faithful recreation and the most beautiful recreation came from the most recent Lego Star Wars game. I think it looks great, and you get some great different angles and perspectives of where he grew up. But again, we've sort of done that in the Lego Star Wars game, and I don't think it looks as cool as it did in Episode 4. I don't know. I think that might just be me. But the city, like I said, an absolutely beautiful location. So we really get into the depths of that, and obviously, like I said, that this is where we meet Leia, and we meet what is potentially another Jedi. And that's one thing I really like about the show, is that they're willing to explore, what if there's more Jedi? How would they respond to that? I love the idea of just plopping Jedi into the world, and Obi-Wan really wants to meet this guy as soon as he finds out that there's another Jedi in this city. I won't spoil what happens when he does, but it's interesting to see how he will respond to that. Now, of course, in this city, he is on the run from the bad guys. Let's talk about the bad guys. We talked about every character, talked about Obi, talked about Uncle Ben. It was Uncle Ben, wasn't it? That's not just Rice. It was Uncle Ben. We talked about Leia, what's his name? Bail, Organa, her dad. It's not too much of an interesting character. Let's talk about the bad guys. Now, the bad guys, they're the Inquisitors. We have, I think, 3. It's weird. I feel like I saw 3, but whenever I think back to the show, I just can't picture how many there were. Although one of them is a sort of... I don't really know. One of them is a third sister. I think we explored this in Jedi Fallen Order. We had, was it the 9 sisters or the 7 sisters? And this, she's the third sister, but she's going with the Inquisitors. You get the sense that she's kind of like an apprentice to this one main bad guy, who we have seen before in Star Wars, but I don't want to spoil too much. And I'm going to be honest with you, the other 2 I wasn't too interested in, or I didn't really feel threatened by. I don't know, I never saw them and was like, oh, those are the bad guys. I just saw them and thought, well, they're going to die. I mean, they'll be dead soon. They're not going to make it. And they'll be replaced with other bad guys, I'm sure. But the third sister was all right. Definitely not the best bad guy, not the best villain in the history of Star Wars, but not a bad one. She follows the trope of being the overly sort of ambitious energetic person with a lot of power who doesn't really know how to control it. You get this with every Star Wars film. With the original trilogy, with the prequel trilogy, it was Anakin. With the original, it was Luke, and with the sequels, it was Kylo. You always have to have one, and she's the one. She's played okay. Her performance is all right, and she does do some things to demonstrate her willingness to just do whatever it takes to find Kenobi. Right, sort of right at the start of the show, much as they did with Darth Vader in Episode 4. When he immediately force chokes someone. I don't think it's as effective. You don't get that like beautiful claustrophobic sense as you have these narrow corridors and this big towering figure breathing heavily through a mask. You don't get anything as great as that. But I buy it. I buy her as a bad guy, and I think it's pretty obvious that she's going to turn towards the end of the show or die. But I think she's going to turn and help them out, because whenever you get these, hot shots, they're always a little bit morally ambiguous, and she seems that way too. But we'll have to see where this character goes. And ultimately, that's how I feel about the show. I feel that despite the fact that we've just had 2 episodes and there's only 6, there's so much more to do. There's so much more to cover, and I really want to see where it goes. I mean, the story itself, at the moment, how do I put this? At the moment, it's a kidnap story. It's a washed-up story. Unfortunately, there is a big trope in this show. Now, for the past 10 or so years, recently, there's been this huge trope that is being used again and again and again and again, and it's the middle-aged, washed-up, used to be superhero, or hero archetype type of guy, who then gets a surrogate kid and has to sort of guide them through a journey. It happened with The Last of Us. It happened with BioShock Infinite. It happened with Logan. It happened with Mando. And I have a few more examples in my head, but I can't really get to them. It's such a trope. There's so many of these stories where the washed up hero has to look after the kid, and this unfortunately is that again by the looks of it. It looks as though that's where it's going to go, which is fine. It looks as though alongside that journey, Kenobi is beginning to find his powers again. I will say that 2 episodes in, we haven't really seen anything too impressive, but he did bring his saber with him and made a point of letting the audience know, so we'll be bringing that out. But watching him, sort of uncover his powers and gain access to them again, so far has been pretty interesting, and I think it's only going to get more interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes. I'm also looking forward to seeing where this sister character goes and who she recruits and who she goes along with next. And that's great.